So welcome, our beloved, brilliant colleague, Eoin. I so appreciate your consistent, remarkable leadership at Bloom Impact Capital and Bloom Local Food Fund. And once, as always, at Setsi, we begin all things by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Eoin, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Thanks, Victor. I am joining today from the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron, and the Wendat, and I'm next to the Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. I am a settler in these lands. I was born in Dublin, Ireland, and your words of wisdom off the top have me reflecting on how my elders on that island really instilled in me from a young age core values that are still at the heart of the work that I do and that give me purpose. And that work is impact investing. So managing director of Bloom Impact Capital and the Bloom Local Food Fund, which invests in food system transformation, a just transition for rural communities, and Indigenous economic reconciliation. And I wear other hats, including as a steward of the Catalyst Community Finance Initiative, where we really benefit from your courage, your willingness to ask tough questions, to have difficult conversations, to hold space, to work those things through. So thank you for that, and thanks for having me.
No, thank you for all the work you do in so many communities and ecosystems. And definitely, it's been a joy to work alongside you at the Catalyst Community Finance table for, I'd say, 2 years now. So I really appreciate all that you do. So my next question is, what inspires you about your work? What currently has you curious?
I'm inspired by a lot these days. I was just chatting with Marc-Andre Roberge and his team. They're a group of kids out of Montreal. They discover that they have two nerdy interests in common. One of them is machine learning. The other is beekeeping. They notice their bees keep dying in greater numbers each year. They're not alone. They get together and say, surely there's something that they can do between them to contribute to the solution to rising bee deaths. And the short version is that they're correct. They develop trackers and sensors that go on hives. They layer AI on top, and that predicts threats to bee health and allows for action. And they've scaled that solution internationally. Their first customer was the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan, a $250 billion Canadian pension fund. That's a fund that has lots of agricultural holdings around the world, buy and hold assets, a long time horizon. That means their models tell them that the threats to pollinators are a risk to their portfolio and also at risk of collapsing our food system. And so Nectar Technologies, which they formed, now has more than 10% of commercial beekeeping on their platform. But I guess the part that inspires me is where they are headed next. And so as the data comes in from that platform, it's increasingly likely that we need to protect and restore biodiversity in order to protect pollinators and the food system. And so they're beginning to lean into the important work of mobilizing rural communities, farming communities, other actors in the food supply chain to begin driving change. And I guess that's a specific application of what is inspiring me more generally these days when I see folks that are facing a big, hairy, existential challenge. They're taking the time to understand the problem, the drivers, and then doing the work of mobilizing others, which can be difficult, which can be messy, but is often necessary to drive change at a systems level. So that's inspiring me today, and others doing that kind of work.
That's inspiring me too. I've been a fan of Nectar from a distance through their LinkedIn page for a while, but to hear the narrative behind it, I think not only inspires me, but I think all our listeners and viewers. So once again, I appreciate you sharing that story and the clear social innovation impact of such a remarkable young team. And once again, I'm sure they benefit from your guidance and wisdom in terms of having leadership and intergenerational collaboration around their work. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work, and what are some of the ways and approaches that you're taking to overcome these barriers and challenges?
Challenges, that's a great question. We were chatting at the table for impact investment practitioners the other day about toggling between micro and macro and how that can be tricky at times. And it comes up a lot in our work. The difference between approaching solutions from a top-down approach or from a bottom-up approach. And I think I'm winding my way towards a conclusion, which is that impact investing has a unique role to play in supporting bottom-up solutions. You know, working with folks that are most directly exposed to a problem, most at risk, most disrupted, who understand the impacts and are then developing the solution in a way that works for them, and then supporting them as they go through the journey of beginning to scale that solution. And so I think impact investing has a role to play in supporting that kind of a bottom-up approach to solving problems. And I've been nudged, I think, in the direction of my conclusions there by a few different recent, developments and things I've been exposed to. I was out in California where I've had the chance to start working with the Larta Institute. They have access to a phenomenal amount of resources, computing power, data, analytical power, networks. They've got folks at the table like NASA, the Space Agency, NOAA, the Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, Google X, which is the moonshot team of Google. So they can work at any scale, planetary, beyond in the case of NASA. And yet when they're looking at food system challenges, emissions from food systems, the need for a transition, their approach is bottom up. They're working in communities that are at risk of food insecurity, of the impacts of climate change, supporting those communities to develop solutions and help them to scale. That includes places like Compton in South Central LA. It includes Hispanic communities, coastal communities in South Florida. So notwithstanding the breadth of options and resources they have, they're leaning into that community-led approach. I'd actually love to connect you, Victor, into some of that work and some of those networks.
That'd be incredible. Thank you so much for your candor. And once again, always being willing to share resources and relationships. And it's a perfect segue to my next question. Do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work?
Yes. Climate, community, and Indigenous economic reconciliation. So on climate, we are working at Bloom Impact Capital and the Local Food Fund on food system transition. So as things stand today, the food system accounts for about 1/3 of emissions. And so even if we are to transition the energy industry, the transportation sector, we're still going to miss targets like keeping warming to under 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, unless we bend the curve in the food system, unless we make our food system more regional, we start to relocalize the means of production, increase food sovereignty, and work with folks leading innovation in food. And for us, based on our values and the communities that we serve and the regional approach, that means a just transition for rural communities. So folks are participating in that transition, they're leading it, they're beneficiaries of it, and it's being pursued in a way that advances justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And where we will need to stretch, where it is an aspiration, is around supporting economic reconciliation, responding to the calls to action in the National Indigenous Economic Strategy. And that's an area in which we rely on partners. and others we can learn from around the ecosystem, including some of the folks that you work with.
That's incredible. It's incredible. So, how do you feel about the future of impact investing in Canada? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? Are you hopeful?
I'm optimistic. We've got to pick up the pace. We got to hurry up. The clock is a ticking, and it is past time. And I draw inspiration and optimism about our ability to do that, in part from the great folks that we work with, but also from looking at other jurisdictions. So I'm just back from Colombia, and while I was there, they became the first oil exporting nation, producer at COP, the most recent UN conference on climate, to call for not just a transition away from, but ultimately an end to our dependence on fossil fuels. And with that, they made a commitment to transition their economy in Colombia away from dependency on petrodollars. And it invites the question, to what? What are you transitioning to? And the answer that they've landed on, the approach that they're taking, is rapidly scaling an impact investing market. So I had a chance to see the pace at which they are doing that, and it is incredibly impressive. So you've got dozens of emerging impact funds rooted in community, rooted in place, in indigenous, doing work in indigenous communities in the Amazon, Afro-Caribbean communities on the coast, and who've got accelerators running, incredibly impressive, diverse ventures on the ground doing the work. Institutional investors, pension funds in Colombia have stepped up and started to back impact in a way that I think offers lessons to other jurisdictions, offers lessons to Canada. And so, there are times when I have a sense of impatience at the evolution of a self-sustaining, resilient, high impact social finance market in Canada. But we're doing the work together collectively, looking at what folks in other jurisdictions are doing, the pace at which they're able to move. I'm confident that we can keep pace.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know that a lot of climate activists in our network at Setsi were really frustrated with that concept of phase down as opposed to phase outs that came out of COP. And then when we think about impact investing in Canada, there is this notion of like almost a macro patience in terms of incremental systemic transformation, but the need for a micro urgency. So I echo your sentiments completely. And to hear about those place-based funds doing this remarkable work in Colombia is just truly remarkable. And once again, it's a testimony to that model that we have to act locally but think globally and figure out ways and means to transition to not just economies but just and sustainable livelihood. So once again, I appreciate all those actionable insights. So this is my second last question, and I appreciate your leadership and your candor. What is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
Yeah, success has a number of milestones. I think that we're still doing the work of building a resilient impact investing market in Canada and beyond. Yeah, that's only one tool, one strategy, but I think it is a necessary condition for success. And so I think that will keep many of us occupied over the next couple of years. And I think success starts to look like many things, including rural communities and food systems at a regional level that have transitioned so that they have greater food sovereignty, so that they are regenerative, they are using sustainable practices, they have a more circular approach to the economy of the sector. And that people in communities are participating in that change. They're leading it. It reflects their aspirations, their ambitions for themselves, for their families, for future generations. And that we are beginning to respond in a clearly demonstrated way on calls to action around Indigenous economic reconciliation. And that, to your earlier point, is a slow and steady achievement over time, but requires us to lean in, pick up the pace at the level of community and at the level at which we're mobilizing capital, reducing barriers, and deploying it to folks that are driving change.
I couldn't agree more. My grandmother used to always say, hurry up and take your time. And I think we need to do that. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Sure, that would be to start where you're at, do what you can, and we will take it from there.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. And I really appreciate your consistent leadership, solidarity. Since the day we met, you've always centered justice, access, inclusion, diversity, and equity in your work. And you've always been a staunch leader and ally. And I just really appreciate all that you represent in the ecosystem and all that you do for so many. So thank you so much for your time. And as always at Setsi, we close the way we began, by acknowledging our creator, by giving thanks to the original stewards, the originals of the various lands that we're on. We give thanks and we honor all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts, whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you, Eoin.